Jesus wanted to eat his last Passover meal with his disciples. So along a dusty street, he walked with them. They went to a large upstairs room, but before they went in, they took off their sandals. That's what people did in those days. Then a servant would wash their dirty feet. But there was no servant at this place, and not one of the disciples said, "Let me be the servant." So all the disciples sat down at the table with dirty feet. Then Jesus started to wash the disciples' feet. How surprised the disciples were. Peter told Jesus,
"Don't wash my feet. This isn't a job for you, Lord."
Jesus said,
"If you don't let me wash you, you can't be my disciple."
Jesus washed the feet of all the disciples. Then he went back to the table and sat down. Jesus said,
"Do you know why I did that? I wanted to teach you how to live. I am your Lord, but I served each of you. Now you must serve one another."
Then Jesus and his disciples started to eat the Passover meal. Jesus told them,
"Tonight one of you will tell my enemies where to find me. They will arrest me."
The disciples were surprised and afraid when Jesus said that. They did not know what Judas had done. Judas was a disciple of Jesus, but he loved money too much. Jesus' enemies had paid Judas 30 pieces of silver. Judas had promised to help them catch Jesus. Jesus knew what Judas planned, but the other disciples didn't. Soon Judas got up. He went to help Jesus' enemies. During the meal, Jesus did a special thing. He broke some bread and gave it to the disciples. He said,
"Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you.
Then he passed a cup of wine. He said,
Drink it, all of you. This is my blood, which I shed to take away your sins."
Jesus told his disciples to eat bread and drink wine in this special way often. He said,
"Do this to remember me."
"This special meal is the Lord's Supper." After supper, Jesus took all his disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane. On the way, he told them,
"All of you will run away. Then my enemies come.
Peter was surprised. He said,
I will never leave you."
Jesus told him,
3 times tonight you will say that you don't know me. Then the rooster will crow.
Peter answered,
I will die with you before I do that."
They got to the garden. Jesus told his disciples,
"Stay here while I pray."
Then Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him to the garden. Jesus told them,
"I feel so sad I could almost die from sadness. Stay here and watch me."
Jesus walked on alone. He fell to the ground and prayed,
"Oh, my Father, please save me. Is there another way to save people from their sin? Then keep me from having to suffer and die for the sins of the whole world, but do what you want, not what I want."
Jesus came back to the 3 disciples. They were sleeping. Jesus woke them and asked,
"Can't you watch with me for even 1 hour? Please stay awake and pray so you won't fall into sin."
Jesus walked away again. He prayed,
"Father, I will do anything you want me to do."
Jesus came back to Peter, James, and John. They were asleep again. Jesus went to pray for a 3rd time. God sent an angel to help Jesus feel strong. Then Jesus went back to his disciples. He told them,
"Get up, it is time for my enemies to take me away. Look, here they come now."
The disciples woke up. They saw Judas walking toward them. A crowd of men followed behind. They carried bright lights and clubs and swords. Judas stepped up to Jesus and kissed him. Now the enemies knew which person was Jesus. Jesus looked at Judas sadly. He asked,
"Judas, are you helping my enemies by giving me a kiss?"
Then the enemies came up to Jesus and arrested him. The enemies led Jesus out of the garden. The disciples thought the enemies might take them too, so they all ran away. Early the next morning, the high priest and church leaders took Jesus to Pontius Pilate. He was the only ruler who could order people to be put to death. Pilate asked,
"What wrong did this man do?"
They said,
"He has caused all kinds of trouble. He has told people not to pay taxes to your king. He even says that he is the king."
Jesus didn't say a word. He stood calm and quiet. Pilate went into his palace. He called Jesus and asked him,
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
Jesus answered,
"My kingdom is not of this world."
Pilate asked again.
"Are you a king then?"
Jesus said,
"Yes, I am a king. But I am not like the kings in this world. I came into the world to tell people the truth. Everyone who believes in the truth is my kingdom."
Pilate answered.
"What is the truth?"
Then Pilate went out to the people again. By now, a big crowd stood outside the palace. Pilate wanted to let Jesus go, so he told them,
"Each Passover I set free any prisoner you choose. Do you want Jesus or Barabbas?"
Barabbas was a robber. Pilate felt sure the people would pick Jesus, but the priests and the church leaders had told the crowd to pick Barabbas. So the people shouted,
"Barabbas, we want Barabbas to go free."
Pilate asked.
"What shall I do with Jesus?" "Crucify him."
The crowd shouted. Pilate went back inside. He told his soldiers to beat Jesus. The soldiers hit Jesus until he was bloody. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They put a purple robe on him. Then they spit on him and laughed at him. Pilate took Jesus back to the shouting crowd. He was sure they would feel sorry for him now. Now they would want to let him go. But the crowd still shouted,
"Crucify him, crucify him."
At last Pilate gave in to the crowd. He told his soldiers to take Jesus and crucify him. The soldiers took Jesus to a hill outside Jerusalem called Calvary. When they got to the hill, the soldiers put Jesus on the cross. They nailed his hands and feet to the cross. Many people walked by and made fun of Jesus. Jesus hurt so much, but he was not angry with the people who nailed him to the cross. Jesus prayed for them. He prayed,
"Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing."
2 robbers hung on crosses next to Jesus. One of them believed in Jesus. This robber was sorry for his sins. Jesus told him,
"Today you will be with me in heaven."
When Jesus had been on the cross for 3 hours, it was noon. The sun shone high in the sky. Suddenly the whole land got dark as night. It stayed dark for 3 hours. All this time, Jesus was suffering to pay for the sins of the world. Because of these sins, God let Jesus suffer all alone. This hurt Jesus most of all. At last, Jesus cried,
"My God, why have you left me?
After that, Jesus said,
I am thirsty."
Someone dipped a sponge into sour wine and gave it to him. A little later, Jesus cried with a loud voice,
"It is finished."
Then he said,
"Father, into your hands I gave my spirit."
And Jesus died. Then some of Jesus' friends took his body from the cross. They wrapped it in cloth and laid it in a grave. They closed the door to the grave with a large stone. The next morning, Jesus' enemies met with Pilate. They told him,
Jesus said he would rise in 3 days, guard his grave. He won't want his disciples to steal his body. They might say he is alive.
So Pilate set soldiers to guard the grave of Jesus. It was very early Sunday morning. Soldiers were guarding the grave of Jesus. All at once the ground shook. A bright, shining angel came from heaven. He rolled the stone away from the grave. The soldiers were very scared. They fell to the ground. Then they ran away. Some women were walking to the grave that morning. They carried spices to put on Jesus' body. They asked one another,
"Who will roll the big stone away for us?"
But when the women got there, they saw that the stone had been rolled away and all of the soldiers had left. Mary Magdalene thought someone had taken Jesus. She went to tell Peter and John. The other women looked into the grave. They saw 2 angels sitting there. One angel said,
Are you looking for Jesus? He's not here. He has risen, as he said he would. Go and tell his disciples.
At once the women ran to tell the disciples. Mary Magdalene did not know that Jesus had risen. She told Peter and John that his body was missing. Peter and John ran to the grave. Mary followed behind. They saw the cloth Jesus had been wrapped in. It was folded neatly, but they did not see Jesus, and they did not see the angels. Then Peter and John went home, but Mary stayed by Jesus' grave. Mary was crying. When she bent over to look inside the grave, she saw 2 angels. One of them asked her,
Why are you crying?
Mary answered,
Jesus is missing. They have taken him away. I don't know where he is.
Just then Mary turned around. She saw a man standing behind her. Mary thought he was the gardener. He asked,
Who are you looking for?
Mary said,
If you took Jesus away, tell me where you have put him.
The man said,
Mary.
Now Mary knew he was Jesus. She cried,
Master, my dear Lord. Now Mary was so happy.
Jesus told her,
Tell my disciples that I am alive.